We were robbed in 1995 and 1996. The US had some amazing RPGs released there, don't get me wrong, but Japan was rocking and rolling. In just the span of 2 years, Japan got some of the most incredible 16-bit RPGs I've ever experienced. These games were late in the life cycle of the Super Famicom, and that's likely part of the reason we didn't get them in the US. So let's take a look at a list of 5 incredible RPGs for the Super Famicom that we didn't get in the West. Now, though, we can play them through the magic of the internet and the sweat and toils of dedicated fans. These are in the order of release date since they're all just amazing anyway. I honestly couldn't rank them by quality. It's just craziness. Seiken Densetsu 3. Seiken Densetsu 3, aka Secret of Mana, aka Trials of Mana, released on the Super Famicom September 30th, 1995, and it instantly garnered a reputation for excellence with the Japanese audiences. Fans elsewhere, of course, had to wait years before experiencing it through fan translations and, much later, official releases. As the direct sequel to Secret of Mana, expectations were high, but Square delivered a game that was not only fitting for the series, but, in my opinion, it was far superior to its predecessor. This game absolutely pushed the Super Famicom to its limits, and in doing so, it gave us one of the most, if not the most, ambitious action RPGs of the 16-bit era. Seiken Densetsu 3 managed to keep the real-time combat and cooperative spirit that made Secret of Mana a fan favorite, but it truly refined nearly every aspect. The AI is better, the action feels faster and more fluid, with more depth including more combos, charge attacks, and a great emphasis on timing. The introduction of a class system is pretty insane, and that's part of where the ambition comes from, as it allowed characters to evolve by branching into light or dark paths that dramatically changed their abilities and combat styles. This mechanic was a huge departure from Secret of Mana and gave players a sense of ownership through the customization of their party's development. It also likely encouraged multiple playthroughs so that one could see how different class builds played out. A friend in stream mentioned that if you're playing on an emulator, you could simply use a save state. Save before you decide to class switch or whatever, and then you can experiment with a few others and figure out what you really like, and that's brilliant. So thank you for that. Good call. One of the neatest features is the branching story structure. Rather than the game being a single story and a single structure, you choose a character to focus on, and then you add 2 other characters to the lineup. This makes their stories sort of interact and gives you bits and pieces of the other 2 while giving you a bit of an in-depth look to the one character. This setup, of course, reminds me of the Saga games and Octopath Traveler, which I really love. There are 6 protagonists to choose from, and your selection determines party dynamics. Again, we get each character's unique backstories, motivations, and connections to the central conflict, but in microdoses compared to the main character. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is my understanding thus far. This, of course, means a ton of replay value as you can experience the overall story in so many different ways. Along the way, you'll see storylines shift depending on who joined the journey, and this even affects the endgame and how scenarios play out. Very few RPGs at the time offer this kind of narrative flexibility, and I dare say that it played out. Graphically, this game bangs. Like, wow. Seiken Densetsu 3 is one of the Super Famicom's most standout and stunning titles. The game's sprite work is unreal, and it has some insanely lovely environments and expressive character animations, which no doubt came about from Square mastering the hardware by this point. Maybe it's one of those cliche sayings, like, Secret of Mana walked so Trials could run or fly or whatever. It's impressive. The villages are lovely, the forests are full of adventure, the caves can be pretty ominous and still fit that standard RPG fare, and every setting is just alive with detail and color. The day-night cycle kind of, blew my mind, as that adds so much to a game, influencing events and enemy behavior, just like the also certain days of the week that affect magic and the like. It's a pretty solid and compelling set of systems that do well to reinforce the game's world. The soundtrack, composed by Hiroki Kikuta, built upon his work in Secret of Mana, but it's somehow better. I think it's better. It's not as memorable for me because I played so much more Secret of Mana than this game, but the music is fantastic in this game. I was jamming so often while playing this game. It certainly captures the mix of wonder and danger. The ability of the composer to so seamlessly shift between different moods and tones regarding where you are in the story or in the world is just impressive. I realize I keep saying that word, and you're probably going to hear it a lot more because every one of the games on this list are so impressive, especially the last one. There's quite a bit going on with the story in Seiken Densetsu 3. It explores concepts of destiny, sacrifice, and struggle between order and chaos. Even hearing about the poor dude who couldn't tell the truth to his girlfriend or she'd die from a cursed collar was some straight up tragedy, and that is awesome. Your misery, dear character, is my pleasure. While it has those typical fantasy tropes, the game's execution made them feel authentic. Characters had to wrestle with personal demons, betrayals, and the burdens of leadership, and it all wraps up so nicely together to make the journey feel intimate as well as epic. Though it never officially left Japan during the 16-bit era, Seiken Densetsu 3 became legendary among importers and fans who sought it out through unofficial means. When Square finally brought it west decades later, first through the Collection of Mana and then the Trials of Mana remake, it forced players to see it for its excellence and allowed us to appreciate both the beautiful, bright 3D version of the game and the incredibly impressive 2D sprite-based version. Seiken Densetsu 3 is one of the several games on this list that gives us the Super Famicom's RPG golden age at its zenith. It gave players choice and consequence in ways few games had ever attempted, and we love it for it. If you like Secret of Mana, boy howdy, do I have news for you. This game is that, but better. This game is that, but better. If Seiken Densetsu 3 was the killer app of 1995 for Squaresoft, then Enix's killer app of 1995 is the next game. I wish I could tell you that it's better, that this next game is better, but that's a major argument. Both of these games are just incredible. So what did Enix create that could stand up to the giant that is Seiken Densetsu 3? Terranigma. Terranigma was released on the Super Famicom back in October of 1995, and it wasn't another RPG just about killing some big bad evil or fighting God or whatever. This game took those lofty concepts and went a step higher. Think about that. Quintet, the same crew that gave us Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, came in swinging with one of the most grandiose and heavy-hitting stories that the 16-bit era ever saw. We're talking life, death, rebirth, the whole cosmic cycle wrapped into an action RPG. Even with all this gravitas and fanfare, world building and rebuilding hope for the future sort of thing, it's still this personal, bittersweet adventure that will likely stick with you because it's also about a young man. You play as Ark, who, to fit the stereotype, is a mischievous kid from a village that, big surprise, is actually chilling in the underworld. Wow, okay. He opens a forbidden door, because you know that's what mischievous kids do in the beginning of big adventures, and suddenly, he's the one. Dang, dude, you opened the door to responsibility. That sucks. Sorry. Now you gotta restore the surface world, womp womp, you know. That happens to us. What does that mean, though, one might ask? Walking. A lot. Oh, and bringing back plants and animals and literally helping humanity crawl from caves and campfires all the way to skyscrapers and satellites. If you played Soul Blazer, you're likely familiar with the idea of restoring a town to its glory, but in this game the stakes are simply a little higher. It's sort of nuts when you think about it. Instead of just being the chosen hero swinging a sword, you kind of feel like the caretaker of an entire planet, watching civilizations rise and fall based on what you managed to accomplish. Again, it's grandiose, and very few RPGs even attempted something like this back in the day. And Terranigma just nailed it. They absolutely killed this concept. The gameplay is an absolute highlight for me. The game's combat is real-time with combos, dashes, spin attacks. It's definitely flashier and smoother than the usual hack-and-slash RPGs of the time. It's addictive, to say the least, really. I just found myself wandering around even when I wasn't lost, just looking for something to beat up because combat is just so fun. Dungeons in the game kept things interesting with some pretty light puzzles for the most part, with some timing and with some agility tests, instead of just the old walk in, bonk the monster and leave. I mean, you do walk in and bonk monsters and leave, but there's a few other steps along the way, and it's enjoyable steps. The story is great, but it's not wildly dynamic as it moves mostly in a straight line. But when you're literally reviving continents and steering the fate of humanity, it feels massive. And the progress you make is satisfying as a player. I mean, you're literally healing the world. Seems like the stakes can't get much higher than that. As you can see, obviously this game still looks great. The sprite work is gorgeous, the towns and landscapes are alive with detail, and the animations give Ark and the people around him so much personality with so little pixels. The composers of this game put together something haunting in making this soundtrack, as it's beautiful and ridiculously atmospheric. In the beginning of the game, walking through the underground between towers is such a wild feeling, accompanied with excellent music. The grandeur in the music when you restore something is also just addictive. It's almost like collecting sounds for the Soundstone in Earthbound. You want it to happen just so you can hear that again. This is one of those soundtracks that makes you stop mid-game just to listen, because it's that good. Terranigma is an excellent action RPG with great combat and great music and great graphics. We can all agree on that, right? But that doesn't quite set it apart from the others. I think part of the distinct excellence of this game is in its tone. It's not afraid to go dark, to ask tough questions about progress, greed, and what it all costs. Humanity's revival isn't presented as this shiny happily ever after. And for the purposes of making you go in a game, it could have been. It could have been simple, but they chose not to do that. The game shows us that this revival concept is messy, it's complicated, and it's tragic at times. While I haven't finished the game yet, I've heard what happens in the end, unfortunately, and it doesn't make me not want to play it. It instead makes me want to see this tragedy to the end. Creation and destruction, joy and loss, it's all tied together. It's heavy stuff, but it's done beautifully. Speaking of bummers, Terranigma never officially hit North America. Japan got it, Europe got it, but thanks to what I understand was the shuttering of Enix's doors due to money issues, we missed out in the US. It was in English for Europe and ready to go, but we didn't get it stateside. And that sucks. That's why, for years, it's been on the fringe of RPG talk in the US. Most folks know about it, but if they haven't played it, they're certainly missing out. I can assure you of that. I can also assure you that if you like action RPGs on the Super Nintendo, this is one of the best. You will not be disappointed. Looking back, it kind of feels like Quintet's magnum opus. It's bold, it's emotional, and it left a mark that hasn't really faded. People still clamor for this game in some re-release, but we've yet to get it. That'd be amazing to have ActRaiser, Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma all in one collection, wouldn't it? That'd be the kind of announcement that would make me just cry manly tears. Manly, sure. Squaresoft and Enix got the chance to, show off in 1995 with Terranigma and Seiken Densetsu, so why should another company get that chance, right? This next game is the beginning of an incredible franchise that is still running today. The game that dared to stand next to the greats and is still going today is Tales of Phantasia. Tales of Phantasia came out on the Super Famicom on December 15th, 1995, and it was a bit different for the RPG world. Developed by Wolf Team and published by Namco, this game was the beginning of the long-running Tales franchise, which would go on to become one of the most important and RPG fan-loved franchises. Chances are, if you're a self-proclaimed RPG enthusiast, you've probably played this series to some degree. What's crazy is that even in its first outing, the game showed that it could break conventions, offer some addictive real-time combat, give audiences incredible and deep storytelling, and wrap it all together in some technological wizardry that pushed the Super Famicom hardware to its limits. The story may be somewhat familiar, it's one of my favorite tropes. A group of heroes unite to defeat an ancient evil, but the game starts at the end. It sets up some complexity with time travel and moral ambiguity, starting us right in the middle of a final battle for someone else's story. When all hope seems lost, the heroes manage to pull through, and that brings us to the new setting with new people. You, as the player, follow Cress Albane and his companions as they attempt to stop the sorcerer Daos, a villain whose motivations prove a little more nuanced than one might expect from an RPG at the time. Along the way, we see themes of legacy, sacrifice, and the cyclical nature of conflict, and this really elevates the narrative beyond the normal, often anticipated hero's journey. In playing this on stream, I was blown away by how dark it gets so quickly. This game really sets you up for several gut punches right in the first few hours, and I was in awe of how well it did it. Chat tried to warn me, but I was just clearly unprepared for that. In this same vein, the inclusion of emotional cutscenes and even fully voiced lines, a technical marvel for the 16-bit era, gave the adventure a cinematic quality, rare for the time. This might have been something you'd expect from a CD-ROM, but the Super Famicom did an amazing job of making this game feel incredibly technologically progressive. Really, I'd say that this game and Star Ocean were doing for the Super Famicom what Donkey Kong did for the Super Nintendo in the US. Maybe it's a little hyperbole, maybe, but still, it's wild. I think you probably get my drift, right? Combat in Tales of Phantasia is, pretty different. Now, this setup might not be a surprise to us today, but this was some wildly forward-thinking battle design back in its day. The developers chose to forego a traditional turn-based system and instead introduce a linear motion battle system. This setup was a side-scrolling, action-oriented approach where players controlled Crest directly in real time, while allies acted semi-autonomously, I guess, or they acted stupid. The jury's still out on that one. This system combined the action of, an action game and the strategy of an RPG, creating something entirely fresh. Spells and abilities had to be timed carefully, combos could be chained, and battles felt fast, fluid, and exhilarating, really. It was certainly a step in a different direction, but it's one that the Tales fans and even folks who've never heard of the Tales series have surely come to appreciate. Gameplay wasn't the only impressive and innovative thing Tales of Phantasia managed to accomplish. It was one of the first Super Famicom titles to use a 48 megabit cartridge, which allowed for not only a vast world, but also features that seemed impossible on the hardware. We got fully voiced clips, an opening theme song with vocals, and some incredible looking sprites. The environments are beautiful towns, dense forests, and intricate dungeons. And the beauty of these set pieces was a bit of polish that showcased the game's ambition. This soundtrack is nasty good, deserving a special mention. The songs in this game are varied and gorgeous, filled with poignant melodies, and they readily set the tone for what would become one of the most iconic aspects of the Tales franchise. It's music. Not a bad start. Nope, it's pretty good. Despite being a technical marvel, Tales of Phantasia never made it to the West during the Super Nintendo era, and apparently this was due to the technological challenges of localization and it being the end of the system's life. Instead, the game became a bit of a legend among importers and fan translators, gaining an underground reputation as a hidden gem. I learned about it from emulation years ago. At some point, I was making English reproductions, and I used to make this one pretty often for people. We did later get this game in a few different places, including on the Game Boy Advance, but I can't really speak to that myself as I've not played the Game Boy Advance version. I have heard that it's not quite what it could have been though. I have heard that the fan translation of the PlayStation 1 game is lovely, but I haven't played that one either. Yet. I do think the original Super Famicom version is brilliant. It looks great, it sounds great, and it's super impressive in what it can do on that cart. As far as I'm concerned, in the time that I've spent with Tales of Phantasia, it's magic. It's magic manifest. It's a product of its time, but it's also a game ahead of its time. The combat is addictive and fun, and the story is so compelling. It's a 16-bit masterclass, and a shame that we didn't get it sooner in the West. We're continuing in a moment, but I wanted to stop and say, if you've made it this far, maybe you like the content. There is plenty more where this came from. My channel focuses on retro RPG content, and I'm building hours of a backlog of content here. If you're looking to binge some content like this, consider some of my other videos or the big playlist I'll leave at the end of this video. If you enjoy what you see, consider liking the content and subscribing for more. Again, it's appreciated. Let's continue. Bahamut Lagoon. Bahamut Lagoon is the last experimental flourish of Square Enix during the 16-bit era. It was released on February 9th, 1996, and after it, Square turned their attention to the PlayStation 1. So, understanding this, you know this is going to be a special game. Though it never left Japan officially, the game quickly developed a cult following among importers and, subsequently, fans who discovered it through those fan translations. It's a weird but enjoyable hybrid of tactical RPG, turn-based combat, and dragon raising. It definitely gave us a unique experience that showed off the ambition and creativity of its developers during the height of the 16-bit era. Basically, Bahamut Lagoon is tactical, like you'd see in Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, but with notable twists that set it apart from the two. As the player, you command squads of soldiers across grid-based battlefields, maneuvering them to engage enemies and control the terrain. It's a lot of magic from a distance and sending in the dragons, and hey, I'm okay with that. I mean, it seems pretty effective. Because of this setup, you're not limited to just melee clashes, and the units can unleash some pretty powerful magic across wide areas on the map. This sort of stuff can alter landscapes too by setting grass on fire or destroying bridges. You can also create pathways on lakes using ice. I mean, it's pretty spectacular stuff to see it in action, and to think that this was a 16-bit RPG. Shoot, I saw this idea on Sayuki Journey West, a 32-bit RPG, and I was impressed there. This environmental dynamic adds a layer of strategy that you just didn't see at the time. Even this many years later, I still think it's impressive. The thing that really makes the game stand out, though, is probably the most obvious thing: the dragons. Each squad, or really character and their buddies, is paired with a dragon companion, and these creatures grow, evolve, and fight alongside the character's forces. Unlike traditional units, dragons act semi-independently, responding to commands telling them to go forward and to retreat, but ultimately, the dragons do their own thing, and you know what? They're not dumb. Praise God, they're not dumb. They be healing when they need it, and they be swarping when they need to. The best AI you could ask for. This puts them already leagues ahead of so many other AI buddies in games. In Bahamut Lagoon, a dragon's growth is determined by the food and items players feed them between encounters, shaping not only their stats, but also their appearances and abilities. You can feed them healing items, typical foodstuffs, weapons, armor. It's pretty wild. They're like trash compactors of characters, but it affects the way they turn out, the way they battle, and everything. It's great. You know, I bought this dirty magazine off this creepy dude in this lady's bedroom, and you know what? I fed that to a dragon too. Why not? How to Train Your Dragon Squaresoft Edition makes your relationship with the dragons feel much more, involved. You're basically caring for, protecting, and nurturing these dragons on top of the tactical gameplay. It's a strategic necessity for your army, but I found myself a little more involved than maybe I should have been, referring to my dragons by their nicknames and trying to make sure that they got a specific diet. I wanted to take care of them things. For a dude who downplays Pokemon all the time, I sure was invested in these dragons. Watching a dragon transform from a small, loyal creature into a towering powerhouse is an awesome sense of progression. And it's addictive. Makes me want to buy more nudie magazines and feed them to dragons.
Nudie Magazine Day!
Narratively, it's on point with other stuff. It's just, I'll be honest, it's just not as compelling as any other title on this list regarding the narrative. That's not to say it's bad though. The world building is amazing. The world building is great. I love the idea of a world consisting of these small lagoons or islands in the sky that you navigate in the story and fly on and such. But for what reason are you fighting? Well, evil empire tropey sort of stuff. That's fine, that's totally fine. But the narrative doesn't drive the game half as well as the combat and the dragon rearing. So you know what you're getting into though. This is the idea. You're leading a resistance group as they struggle against an imperial force threatening the floating kingdom of Aurelis. It's a familiar tale of rebellion that grows into something richer, exploring some cool ideas, loyalty, betrayal, and the sacrifices required in war. But again, it's just similar to so many Square titles and other RPGs of the era. It doesn't shy away from bittersweet turns, and I can appreciate that. But it boils down to victory has a cost. It's good. It's not stellar. The story sort of just pales in comparison to fighting with dragons. There's just not a whole lot memorable about the story, but you know what I do remember? Feeding a nudie magazine to a dragon? What is impressive is the graphics of this game. Oh, they are lovely. I feel like it really pushed the Super Famicom's hardware to its limits. This game might not look like Star Ocean, but it also didn't use any sort of special hardware for the cart. The character sprites were expressive and colorful, while the battlefields brimmed with detail, from shimmering waters to blazing infernos conjured in the middle of the battle. The dragons themselves were particularly striking, with designs that showcase their elegance and danger. The soundtrack is incredible. It's great. It's Square Enix stuff of the 90s, and it represents the dichotomy of triumph and tragedy appropriately. This game isn't Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger, sure, but it's still an amazing game. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger, I'd say play those. But if you love those and you're looking for something beautiful and a bit different, even maybe a little more complex regarding the combat, consider Bahamut Lagoon. It's not particularly difficult once you know its systems, but it's a marvel to behold among other 16-bit giants. This last game was released so incredibly late in the Super Famicom's lifespan, but it came out with all the bells, all the whistles, the whole deal. If you're looking to see 16-bit mastery on a cartridge, look no further than this technical wonder and excellent RPG. Let's talk about Star Ocean. Star Ocean hit the Super Famicom on July 19th, 1996. Again, pretty late in the life cycle. And let me tell you, this game is pretty nutty. What a swan song for RPGs in the 16-bit era. Just, talk about impressive. Anyway, at this point, the PlayStation was already sort of strutting around the room with its shiny polygons and CD audio, but the Super Famicom had the hold my beer sort of moment. And that's how we got Star Ocean. Now maybe this is a bit hyperbolic, as the PlayStation 1 was rocking and rolling straight out of the gate as well, but it's just so important, I think, to consider what Tri-Ace was able to do when they created this beast. It is absolutely brimming with ambition, innovation, and the sheer we're going to go where no man has gone before kind of vibe. Star Ocean was developed by Tri-Ace, which was formed by staff that had worked on Tales of Phantasia. Now you can see the remnants of that style all over this game, right? I mean, the combat isn't exactly the same, but it's pretty close. It just allows you to move a little more north and south on the battlefield, and the storytelling is really punching above its weight. And we even see it in the compression wizardry needed to squeeze voice clips and advanced graphics onto a cartridge. I mean, Tales of Phantasia has that awesome song, right? And Star Ocean has this fully voiced opening cutscene.
Would you like some coffee, Captain?
Yes, I'd like that. Thank you.
Now, we're used to double dibble, but not that kind of voice acting. That's what on earth? Or off Earth. Womp womp, whatever, It's a bad joke. Star Ocean is a flex, I think. Is this where repetitive battle voices came from? maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure on that, and a quick Google search didn't turn up much. Was it lunar for the Seiken City? Whatever. It had to be close. Do you guys know? Either way, I mean, let me know in the comments if you're familiar. Like, where did the whole, like, let's do this battle thing over and over come from? But what a staple for future RPGs, right? Where would we be without shouting our moves? The story starts off by showing us the ship, which establishes the technology of the universe, but then we find ourselves on the planet Roke, watching a seemingly computer techless town being invaded. Our leader, Roddick, is part of a defense force for the town, and so he has to deal with some invaders. After this, we learn that a mysterious disease is turning people to stone in a nearby town. In order to save some folks, we're forced to look for a flower on a mountain, and then we meet the spaceship folks who beam us up, and suddenly we're galactic. It shifts from typical fantasy RPG to Interstellar Federation type stuff. It's starships, and from here it shifts back and forth. These two different worlds sort of colliding is honestly great. It's Star Ocean. Star Ocean is an action RPG with real-time combat. You've got your party on the battlefield, and you can move around, chain combos, and smack enemies up in the air, beat them down into the battlefield. It feels a bit like a super simple fighting game, given the ability to hold shoulder buttons and do abilities and such, hit multiple enemies at once, that sort of stuff. It's a very involved battle system, and never once did I find myself frustrated or bored in battle. If you're used to strictly turn-based RPGs like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, it feels like stepping into the future. How appropriate. Star Ocean, for as much ambition as the card itself, the story, and the graphics go for, layers even more on top through the intense amount of customization that it offers. Star Ocean introduces quite a few moving parts and branching concepts. Not just through private actions, though they are certainly neat, players make choices that decide which characters end up in their party and which side events that you see. This isn't the first game to do this, but it was one of the earliest RPGs to give you this kind of freedom in party dynamics, and it's awesome, even if it's a bit overwhelming if you're a completionist. On top of this, the game has a wild skill system that you put points into that allows you to enhance the healing of items or gives you the ability to craft. And on top of that, you can craft a ton of different gear from farming enemies. It's just so ahead of its time. It's so in-depth. It really boggles me that they were able to fit that inside of this cart. It's insane. Star Ocean it's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. The sprites are crisp, the animations in battle are smooth, and the environments really make you feel like you're exploring both a fantasy world and dipping your toes into sci-fi. The music is fantastic. It's just an overall package of excellence on these fronts. The battle themes are bangers, the overworld theme is a banger, the town of Cantal sounds like country roads a little bit, so I love that. Yeehaw!
You know who that was? Mr. Sunshine on my shoulders, John Denver.
Even with the limits of the cartridge technology, this soundtrack and these graphics make the game feel so cinematic. Star Ocean is one of those games where you can tell that the devs knew that they had the opportunity to push. They were working on the bleeding edge of possibility for the Super Famicom. This is, of course, with the help of a huge amount of storage and the extra potential for storage due to the SDD1 compression chip that each cart had. This is, unfortunately, one of the things that kept the game from getting a release in the US, because at this point those carts were expensive, especially compared to disc. Enix, who was publishing it, had already shuttered their American publishing doors, so we just had to suck it up, I guess. We got the game later on the PSP and then a remake of the game in 2019. If you're interested in any of them, I have a link to some of the Star Ocean games in the description below. Despite not getting it then, hey, we have it now, right? Through unofficial translation and then through new remakes. And that's fine by me. Star Ocean is the pinnacle. It's a perfect blend of traditional JRPG storytelling, innovative mechanics, and that end of an era polish that only comes about when a console is about to call it quits. And it made for a wildly impressive game. And when it comes to the end of an era, it's difficult to match one that had as much RPG excellence as 16-bit Nintendo.